Abducted at gunpoint, shot 3 times, and left for dead in a ditch. This is the tragic story of Laura Kucera. Welcome to my channel. My name is Sean. I do true crimes, and if you're new here, welcome. If you're a returner, thank you for coming back. Like I said, this is a story about Laura Kucera. Now, I'm hoping I am pronouncing her last name correctly. I know the last name and it's pronounced a couple different ways, so I'm just doing the most the way I've heard it the most. So this is actually kind of a perplexing case to me because it happened near my hometown in 1994 when I was there, and I never even heard about it. So yeah, it's kind of disturbing to me that I never heard about it. So let's get started. Laura Jean Kucera was born August 17th, 1975, in Columbus, Nebraska, to David and Mary. She had 5 brothers and 2 sisters. Soon after she was born, they moved to Wakefield, Nebraska, which is 8 miles from my hometown of Wayne. In April of 1994, Laura met Brian Anderson. She was smitten by his charm. He was 22. She was 18 at the time, I believe. And he seemed like Romeo himself. He would open doors for her, buy her flowers, do all the gentlemanly things that a guy should do. He even sat and talked to her father, which was very impressive to her. But this loving behavior quickly turned to obsession and desire to control Laura. He would confront her friends about dates that he had with her, and he'd even wait for her at her job, demanding that she comes with him every night. Eventually, she became uncomfortable around him and tried to taper off the time that she would spend with him. Unfortunately, the more she pulled away, the more aggressive and hostile he would get. Excuse me. In July, she told him that she no longer wanted to see him, and she ended their relationship. Well, Anderson became enraged and pulled out a shotgun on her. He put the gun to her head and said that if he couldn't have her, nobody would. After what seemed like an eternity to her, he lowered the gun and gave her a chance to flee. After this moment, Anderson started to stalk her. He would call her late nights. He even threatened to burn down her home with her family in it. I couldn't find anything, and I'm not really sure why, but it doesn't seem like it was ever reported to the police, because saying things like that would be a terroristic threat, so I don't know why it wasn't ever, but she did eventually or get an order of protection against him. A month after this, he stalked her down and asked her if she wanted to start a relationship again, and she kind of denied him. And his response was to grab her by the throat and place a gun to her head. She closed her eyes, thinking, this is my last moments of life. And as she closed her eyes, she saw him slowly squeezing on the trigger. She heard a click of the gun dry firing, and he whispered to her, "See how easy it would be?" and like I said before, appears that she never reported this to the police. Um, but luckily, they did notice that the two were together and arrested him for violating the protection order. And he is placed in jail for 30 days. But like most protection orders, it worked as well as trying to escape a wet paper bag. Because 2 days after he got out of jail, he ran her off the road and held her prisoner for several hours before releasing her. Soon after this, things had settled down a little bit, and she went to her friend Sarah Tello's home. It was a Saturday, October 1st, 1994. And Laura and Sarah sat on the front lawn, just basking in the sun, talking as Sarah's little brother and sister played in the front yard. After a while, a white truck came down the road and stopped. Laura knew it was Anderson. He exited the vehicle and had this dirty Fu Manchu mustache. That's the one that goes like way down like that. He told Laura to come talk to him for a minute, and instead she rushed into the home and grabbed the phone to dial 911. Well, when she turned around, Anderson had followed her into the home. The two children that were playing outside decided they needed to go see what was going on, so they followed him in. And Laura thought, okay, well, I will go outside with him because I want to get him away from these children. So they got outside, and again, he's like, Laura, I just want to talk. They got closer over to his truck, and he reached out and yanked her arm and pulled her like toward the truck. And that's when she screamed for Sarah to call the police. At the same time, because of all the commotion and all the noise, Sarah's mom and brother, Mike, came outside. So Anderson dragged Laura to his truck and pulled out a pistol. He pointed at the people on the lawn and said that it was none of their business and to get back into the house. As they backed into the house, they watched him push Laura into the truck. He gunned it out of town and into the country. He took back roads to avoid any authorities. He drove through the windy roads and the cornfields and the beans. She was scared and had no idea where they were. Eventually, he drove across the blacktop, and she saw a sign that said Macy was 6 miles away. This had meant that he had driven to the Omaha Indian Reservation, and that was about 50 miles away from Wakefield, taking the normal highway. Taking gravel roads and everything is a little bit quicker, but still way, way out of the way. He drove to a bluff overlooking the Missouri River and pulled her out of the truck. Again, he said that he just wanted to talk to her. He told her that she provoked him, but he is willing to overlook this and have a fresh start. He promised things would be different. Now, he keeps saying, I want to have a conversation. I want to talk to you. But the thing is, with all that driving, because I think it said that it took about 2 hours for them to get to that point. Did they not talk at all? And it never really covered that. It just said, that he stopped and then wanted to talk. Well, Laura was a smart girl, and she acted like she was actively listening to what he's trying to say, nodding her head and things like that, while she's looking for an escape route. She saw it. She saw that he left the driver's door of his vehicle open. And thinking and knowing what type of person he was, she knew that he normally left the keys in the ignition. So that's when she took her chance. He turned away to look out at the river on the bluff, or off the bluff, and she ran for the vehicle. As soon as she got into the truck, she locked the doors and realized there was something wrong. And she watched him walk over to the vehicle and pull out the keys out of his pocket. He unlocked the door and shoved her violently over to the other side of the seat. He drove around for another 30 minutes and then stopped by a meadow. He said, "I can see I am not going to change your mind, but can we still be friends?" Laura was ticked off, scared, mad, tired, and she blurted out, "I would rather die than to be friends with you." He sighed because of this and just said, "Then you better start running." Well, she did just that. She got out of the truck and she started to run. She heard him get out of the truck, but she wasn't going to look back. She just kept on running. She heard the door slam, but there was nothing else. And she just kept running and running and running. Then she just heard a pop. Came from behind her. And then she felt the burning in her shoulder as a bullet ripped into her skin. She stumbled, but kept running. She then heard another shot, and this time she felt it in the back of her neck. But miraculously, she just kept running. And this slowed her down, and she stumbled quite a bit. But she just kept running, and she heard him running behind her. She could hear him panting because he's like out of breath and everything. And she was just so determined to beat him. She was determined to live. But she heard him getting closer and closer. And then she heard him say that she was coming, or she heard him say, "I'm coming," as the third shot rang out. And this one hit her in the back of the head. She fell face first into the earth. She laid there with 2 bullets in her head and 1 in her shoulder in a ditch in the country. Not knowing what else to do, Anderson walked back to his truck and headed back to Wakefield. He had a police scanner, so he was listening to that, and he heard that the Dixon County Sheriff's Office had a manhunt out for him, and it was basically an all-points bulletin trying to figure out where he was with Laura. So he stopped along the way back to Wakefield and called the sheriff's office, stating that he heard that they were looking for him, and he just said that he dropped her off at South Sioux City, in Nebraska, and that's where he dropped her off, and he had no idea where she went from there. Well, they still said that they wanted to talk to him and for him to meet with them. And he was okay with that, because he thought that they fell for his ruse. County Deputy Donnie Taylor advised him of his rights. Yeah, he knew about the terror that Anderson caused Laura in the past, so somehow it must have gotten reported back to the police, but it never said how. And he just sat there and asked what he did with Laura. Anderson said that he didn't do anything. He stated that they drove around for a while and talked, and then she asked him to drop her off at Hardee's in South Sioux. He stated that was around 8:15 in that evening. Well, the seasoned deputy smiled and said, "I don't want to call you a liar, but that's where the state police hang out on their breaks. So if she was there, don't you think they would have saw her because they're all looking for her too?" And this is when Anderson said that he thinks that he might need to talk to his lawyer. This was all Saturday night. On Monday morning, a state police investigator Doug Johnson contacted Deputy Taylor after hearing about what happened Saturday. Both men agreed that Anderson more than likely killed Laura and that her body was somewhere in northeast Nebraska. They needed to find her body for her family. They decided to both meet with Anderson's attorney, Douglas Luby, and they stated to him that it's only a matter of time before some hunter would stumble along her body, and that it'd probably be better off in Anderson's decision for them to, or for him to tell them where she is before that. Trying to figure out a good plea agreement, I guess, just to, lessen the charges or something, but mainly to get mainly to get her body back to her family. On Tuesday, Anderson said that he was ready to confess. The Dixon County attorney and Anderson's attorney had met. They agreed that if he leads them back to her body, that he would only be charged with second-degree murder and be able to get out of jail in 10 years. They would take the kidnapping charges off the table. Originally, the county attorney was going to refuse this deal because he didn't feel it was a good enough punishment. But Laura's father chimed in and said, just take the deal. We want our daughter home. It doesn't matter if she's dead or alive. We just want her home. We don't want her out there. So just take whatever deal, get it over with. So after signing off on that deal, he admitted to shooting her and leaving her in a meadow outside of Macy. Now, this is late at night already, so dozens of law enforcement officers drove into the night to find Laura's body and bring her home to her family. Deputy Taylor had Anderson in the back of his vehicle, and they arrived around the meadow around 11:15 at night. They fanned out with all their lights piercing the darkness. The night was alive with shadows moving all about, and Trooper Johnson's heart stopped when he saw a body. There she was. She was about 20 feet from the road under 2 elm trees. He saw that she was on her back with her right knee up at an angle, like she's just relaxing on her back. The officers were trying not to disturb the crime scene, but trying to get to her. And the trooper was startled when he thought that he saw her leg moved, but just figured it was all the shadows, all the lights flashing around and everything like that. But then she moved again. My God, she's alive, he screamed as they raced to her side. And then they called for an emergency helicopter. Both Johnson and Taylor knelt down next to her body and reassured her that she was going to be okay. You're going to be fine. She was moaning a little bit, but there was, it was a bad situation. I mean, she'd been there for 4 days. While they waited for the salvation of the helicopter coming to rescue her, Trooper Johnson walked back to the vehicle where Anderson's lawyer was and said, "Hey, Luby, hate to tell you, but the plea agreement is in the toilet. Laura is alive." Remember, he agreed to this plea agreement for murder. Well, she wasn't murdered. So, plea agreement's no more. It's null and void. And that means they can prosecute him for whatever the heck they wanted to. They got her to the hospital in Sioux City, Iowa. and started life-saving work. With the 2 bullets, the doctors were unsure if she'd ever walk or wake up again, let alone, be lead a normal life. She was not as dehydrated as that figure for being left out there for 4 days. It had rained and had really cold temperatures since it was October. The other interesting thing is she didn't lose that much blood. Uh, and her body temperature was a little low, but not terribly bad. It was still in the 90s. So somebody was watching over her, apparently. She astonished everyone with rapid recovery. She was released from the hospital November 19th. So this was October 1st. November 19th, she was already released from the hospital. She even recovered her ability to walk and talk. On March 3rd, 1995, she sat in the lawyer's office across from Anderson, who tried to stare her down and tried to intimidate her, but she was having none of it. She faced him and she recounted everything from her day of terror because of him. During the trial, neuropsychologist John Mayers stated that the bullet damaged some of her brain and injured the ability to send messages to control centers. He also said that her IQ was lowered because of the damage, maybe even by 20 points. He went on to say that her muscle movements would be suffered from the damage, and he said that there was no indicators that she would ever improve from her condition, and this would be a lifelong suffering. As bleak as it sounded for her, I think a lot of it also was to make sure Anderson would stay in prison a little longer. Seeing that she had defeated him and he was pretty much screwed, Anderson changed his plea to guilty on March 27th. In Dixon County, he was found guilty of attempted kidnapping and the use of a firearm to commit a felony. In Thurston, he was found guilty for attempted second-degree murder and use of a firearm to commit a felony. They dropped the plea agreement. They dropped the kidnapping charges in Thurston County. Big deal. Judge Maurice Redmond sentenced him to 125 years in jail. His projected release date is March 17th, 2063, and he has a parole possibility in September 20th of 2036. So another 13 years from now. And the judge in court basically said you're a coward and a terrible person for what you've done. So pretty harsh words from a judge. And as happy of an ending as this seems, on September 13th of 1995, so just a few months after he went to prison, Laura died. She was driving her car to her grandmother's house over by Clarkson, Nebraska, and it was thick gravel road where she lost control and went into the ditch and rolled over and died. For her obituary, at the end, they said that memorials could be suggested to be sent to Haven House for Battered Women in Wayne, Nebraska. So, trying to protect women of domestic violence. And she was only 20. Her family still lives in northeast Nebraska area. I think like a brother lives in Norfolk. I think her dad's in Columbus. I mean, they're just scattered in northeast Nebraska. I have friends that knew her. You know, that's what I'm like saying, that it really sucked that I never heard anything about this, because some of my good friends knew her. And they're saying how wonderful, she was just a free spirit. She was very nice and sweet and loving. And I think that's the reason she gave Anderson so many chances, until she just got fed up. Um, I feel bad for her family and her friends. I looked it up. Her friend Sarah is still living in Wakefield. It's a sad situation. Domestic violence. People just don't understand the severity of it. Just a few weeks ago, an officer over in Iowa, just a few miles from Omaha, he was shot and killed during a domestic violence where he responded to, and the husband shot and killed him. A girl that I dated in high school from Norfolk, back in like 98, her husband that she married shot and killed her. My wife's cousin was severely beaten and battered and broken by her husband. She survived, but I've seen the pictures and it's horrendous. But she survived, and she now tries to help battered women. So there's some good stories, I guess, that come out of it. But it's not just women that get battered. My first wife was pretty abusive, verbally. I've known people that are being bullied or abused by their children. It's not good. So, I'm sorry to all of Laura's family and friends, and I hope that I did her justice in this. As an ending note, a good buddy that I trust said that he knew somebody that was in prison with Anderson, and he is not having an enjoyable prison sentence, apparently. So I guess there's a little bit of justice, but I think it'd be better to have Laura alive than him getting his ass kicked every day. So I don't know. It is September. This is probably my last one, I think, for September. And October, I'm going to do a couple other ones. I might try to do one that's just a mystery horror Halloween one right before Halloween. Otherwise, I am going to continue through. And then after October, I might take a couple week break. But I don't know. Love you guys. Thank you for watching. Please, if you haven't yet, subscribe, like, and comment. I respond to every comment I can. So be good to yourself. Be good to others. Love yourself. Love others. Let's just make this world a better place. Okay. See you next time.